Welcome. You are at the CCC.
Where there are no outside issues. I'm Bonnie Violet. I'm a trans femme, genderqueer, spiritual drag artist, digital chaplain, and person in recovery.
I'm Anthony. I'm a excuse me. I'm a 6-year doctoral student in clinical psych. I just had a loogie in my throat, and I care about you.
A Lukey. Hi, and I'm Lulu. And my pronouns are he and him. I'm in recovery for crystal meth and alcohol. I'm a former Miss Castro Country Club, and I am always searching for balance.
And each week we provide and create a brave space where we engage in conversations around topics of recovery.
And our intention is to explore and hold and inspire better spaces for people in recovery.
By tackling topics sometimes used to separate us. Anthony, you missed your cue.
No, I thought there was.
You were supposed to interrupt me.
Oh no. Okay, that's what I thought. Okay, I was like working really hard not to interrupt you. Were you done?
So what are we supposed to do? Share the video, ding the bell.
Oh, this is my part. Fuck. Oh, like, subscribe, share, comment, and ding that bell. Ding,
I always worry about forgetting my lines. That's my nightmare.
Right.
It's charming when we stumble a little bit.
Do you?
Yeah, I think it's charming.
Every week we talk about this, and I don't know.
Yeah, and you think we should be more professional.
I don't know.
I don't know if anyone who's watching us right now. I'm scraping off the chocolate off of this plate because that's where I'm at right now.
Okay.
So how is everyone?
How are you, Bonnie?
I'm good. I'm not scraping the chocolate off of a plate. I'm in Boise, Idaho. Yeah, I'm house sitting, so I have like a new background. You know, that's the joys of all the moving around is I get a new background every week.
Nice. And what's the weather like?
It is like 90 something or 100.
Yeah,
It's
nice.
been really hot.
It's nice here. It's a little uncomfortable here in the studio.
Yes, no air conditioning in the Bay.
No, we don't know how to do.
I have a portable AC.
Yeah, so I'm good. It's like things have been actually pretty good. There was something that I was going to mention, but whatever. I had a little bit of a scare. I thought I had COVID last week, but I think what it is, I got a little sick, and it felt like I had some of the same symptoms. So I'm such a hypochondriac now. It felt like, oh God, no, it's happening again. Again, I don't have this much time to take off from work. Yeah. So I made it out alive. Yes.
Yay.
I'm glad you're healthy.
Yeah. Oh, actually, you know what I was going to mention? So last night, something that we do here locally, and I think it started in LA. It's an idea called a watch. And what happens is when an individual is coming up on a year, folks get together the evening before midnight and kind of watch them, celebrate them, and stick with them to get to that year. There's usually food because we like food, and cake because there was cake, and it was a lot of fun, and it was really nice to kind of celebrate someone coming up on a milestone and seeing all their hard work pay off. So yeah,
that's awesome.
That's great.
Yeah, that was nothing. I didn't experience any of that until I got to the Bay Area, and that's mostly like a crystal meth anonymous thing too, right?
Oh yeah, because we need to be watched.
Yeah, I feel like it's CMA specific, but I don't know.
Did I ever tell you about my thing with CMA?
Go ahead.
Like I just love the guys in CMA. All of my exes are from CMA.
But that makes a lot of sense.
I just love tweakers.
No, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Y'all are just so charismatic and effervescent.
Were you a tweaker?
No, I wasn't. I'm more of a depressive, so I think that's why I like CMA people.
It's like balance. Yeah.
They're so adventurous.
Yeah.
That's one way to.
I have a different experience depending on what city I'm in, because I can qualify for a lot of different programs, whether it's crystal meth or alcohol or codependency or Al-Anon, that sort of stuff. But I have different cities that I enjoy different things. So like I really love Chicago CMA, and AA pretty much everywhere else.
Okay.
That was a really good story. I really like that
I
one.
know exactly.
One of your best.
It makes sense because there are some like CMA like here. While CMA here in San Francisco might be predominantly gay, CMA in other areas not so much because
Yeah.
crystal meth like has kind of ravaged this country.
Oh, true.
Yeah.
You want to hear
Yeah.
something weird? Some of the best AA that I've experienced was in Mississippi.
Okay.
Isn't that wild?
Well, you
You wouldn't think
definitely-
that.
Well, no, but
Why wouldn't
I think you have to you have to block out all your
Yeah, all your idea. I
misconceptions.
mean, okay, well, yeah, I mean, it was great. I really liked it. You weren't allowed to curse in meetings, although I have mixed
Did they
feelings
close
about
with
that.
they closed with the Lord's
I
Prayer?
love the Lord's Prayer all the time.
How'd you feel about that?
I don't mind it.
I know it's interesting.
I
I
don't
don't have
mind
a
it.
problem with it or whatever, but all of a sudden somebody wants to do the Lord's Prayer, and I'm like,
Yeah.
because I'm looking at other people freaking out. I'm
It's
like,
a risk.
it's a
Yeah, in early recovery, it was a big deal for me, but I got over it real quick. Getting sober here in Idaho.
Yeah.
in Idaho.
In Idaho.
Did you tell us how you were doing? You did already, huh?
Yeah, I did,
Bonnie did
Mhm.
too.
and I told a little story. How cute!
You did tell
Yeah,
a little.
it's-
So did Bonnie Violet.
Yeah,
I
Little-
attempted to, but you made fun of it, Anthony.
Did I?
Well, we're talking about designated spaces today, so it might be good, huh?
Oh, okay. Oh, because of your CMA story. So,
Mhm.
no one asked me, but I'll tell you how I'm doing. It's. I just wanted to play the victim.
and you played
It
some-
wouldn't be it
I'm-
wouldn't be an episode if you
you
weren't.
a golden statue. It's like, come on, and
a golden statue
and the best actress in the podcast.
in the what
Right.
podcast?
Podcast.
God, my best comebacks come when I'm like not on air.
Mm.
But I've been feeling really good. This weekend, I locked myself in my apartment and I just wrote and wrote and wrote and wrote. And I'm feeling very good about my progress. I'm a lot less anxious. Enlisted the help of some friends with some of the other things that I'm working on. And it's been really nice. And it's also been, I've been reminded of just like how integral, how important the program is to my mental health. And I noticed that the more anxious I am, sometimes it's harder to maintain some of my routines, like meditating and prayer in the morning. I don't know why that is. I think it's because the noise gets really loud and it just feels so cumbersome to try to meditate or to try to pray, when in fact, that's probably the time when I should do it most. So yeah, it's been pretty good.
Right on.
Great.
So Bonnie Violet, you were talking about what we're going to talk about.
No,
No.
was I?
Talk about what we're going to talk about. Yeah, you were saying today's episode is about designated spaces.
Yes, the importance of designated spaces. And what do we need? What do we mean by that, Lulu?
Well, what do we mean by that? Like when I was talking to you about this idea of designated spaces, it came from like witnessing a conversation with folks who didn't understand or could not appreciate, and was kind of maybe vilifying or trying to attacking people for. Designated spaces are mainly like spaces where they're devoted to, like, if it's a trans situation, it's trans, where it's transing, where it's lesbian, gay, if it's African American, if it's Latino, or what have you. And I believe a lot of this came from the fact that, when you don't have a space, you create a space for yourself.
Mhm.
When you don't feel safe in the space that's provided, then you, like they say for meeting, grab a coffee pot and a big book and go start a meeting somewhere else. And I
Mhm.
think that, like, for me, like I always said, like, it was so important that, like, for me to get sober, that I cut all the variables out. Like, I didn't want to deal with anybody, the race stuff, the gay stuff, or whatever. If I could have gone to a recovery place where there were only Lewises exactly like me, to where there was no differences at all, we could just do the work, it would have been great. But
Yeah.
since that's not possible, that was just a tangent. Sorry.
Yeah. You know what's interesting? Go ahead, Bonnie Violet.
No, I was just saying that's a good tangent.
Well, I don't know. So
Yeah, see, bless you.
I'm learning from the two of you.
Uh-huh.
What I wanted to say is that I think one of the reasons why designated spaces now can be so controversial is because I think people forget about why we have designated spaces or what the origin of designated spaces is. So I think we can go back as far back as like the 1920s and even before that, when, for example, like Jewish people weren't allowed to work at law firms, right? And so if you notice, if you look at law firms, especially older law firms, you have very distinct like Jewish law firms, and then you have all the other law firms, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, like we have historically Black colleges. Well, why do we have historically Black colleges? Because you had, you know, people who weren't allowing Black folks. Well, there's a lot going on there, but to simplify it, right? Like it came out of necessity.
Yeah.
Similarly, why do we have gay clubs or gay bars? It came out of necessity. And so because we're so far removed from that, I think it's really easy to look at, say, an all male meeting or an all trans meeting or an all POC meeting and make that about something other than what it is.
Yeah, exactly.
You know what I mean? And I find like the most flack that I've ever heard any meeting get has been like when white folks show up at like POC meetings, you know? And it's always, maybe I should not say this on air, but it's always, in my experience, it's always someone who is like 60 plus years old from from a generation that, I don't know, may still have some
Racist stuff.
yeah,
As in the
Racist
I-
issues that we haven't
Yeah.
unpacked. Uh-huh.
Mhm. As in, so like the are you saying the older generation on which, I guess, on which side in that situation?
yeah, I think so. I'll speak to my experience. Also, for people at home, if you can hear me chewing, can you please send us a message? Because I'm trying really hard to move away from
get
the
like-
mic.
get like a ton of
I have,
messages. Yeah,
I have M&Ms and a Snicker bar here, and I just finished eating a chocolate cake.
Yeah, it's been pretty scary.
So I'm like super stressed out, and this is how I deal with it. So what I was going to say, older people, let me not generalize. In my experience, what has happened is that it has generally been older gay white men who will show up to a POC meeting of any type and will take issue with, for example, being asked not to share or being asked to create space. And one of the things that I hear a lot, even outside of AA, but in political spaces, is this idea of reverse racism, which by itself is problematic.
Yeah.
But the point is that what is it? It's the same like kind of usual suspects in my
Absolutely.
experience.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah, that was what I had assumed, but I was just, I guess, wanted to point it out more clearly.
Yeah. All right.
No, I was thinking.
Yeah.
What I was thinking about was fascinating. Is like, yeah, what you were talking about is like, so you have folks, and it's probably that same group. Where like, but you've been working so hard for equality. Why are you all of a sudden wanting to be separate? And well, you know, the struggle is real. The struggle
Right.
is absolutely real. I feel like we come in already not trusting, and sometimes what it takes is looking towards folks who look like you.
Hmm.
These spaces are so important for individuals, especially like folks in the trans community, because already dealing with so much violence and so much kind of negativity or whatever, even from the gay community, especially from
Yeah.
the gay community, being able to have a space where you can go and you can get your recovery without the unnecessary drama. These places are so important, you know?
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is. And I think for somebody to not see the value in it, just, I think that tells you right there, like that they don't get it. And there's probably some state of like some place of privilege, and it's,
Oh,
I know that sometimes it can be when because we're all marginalized in a lot of ways, like even, cis gay white men are even somewhat marginalized, right? Or that was their experience, especially I think an older generation, that was their experience when they were our age or even younger. And so I know for me, it's been difficult at times to look past my own struggle and acknowledge or notice that maybe somebody else is having a different struggle. And that both can exist, and it doesn't have to be that one is better or worse. Like, it's not getting into like the oppression Olympics, but I think it's important to acknowledge that there are those differences, and some things are more severely, I guess, felt maybe than more than others, and a lot of that is it is somewhat relative, but there are some general, you know, generalizations as well.
Right. And I think you kind of gestured toward this, but there are also those overlaps, or what some folks call intersections, right? Like there are some white folks, for example, my best friend Tim, he's straight. He like grew up, and his family, they were the kind of family that they made too much for financial aid, but they didn't make, they fell into this like weird gray area. And so he had this experience where he was surrounded by a bunch of other wealthy white folks, but he couldn't relate. And in many cases, he had to be in other spaces, right? And so that's a very different experience, right? I also I grew up in the projects, and there were white folks who grew up in the projects with me, right? And those people had very different experiences than the white folks that were coming from like the wealthier parts of town. And in many ways, they had more in common with Black and brown folks than they did with white folks.
Oh yeah.
Right. So there are all these intersections that make the conversation so complicated.
Yeah.
And I can see, for example, when a person has an intersection and that intersection isn't being acknowledged because maybe phenotypically or the way they look physically doesn't kind of align, right? I guess the takeaway here is that it's very complicated.
Oh yeah. We had before I got sober, and I guess maybe the precursor for my sober life or whatever, I participate in this group that's in the city through the San Francisco AIDS Foundation called the Black Brothers Esteem. And I remember specifically they had like this regular meeting group that was Phoenix Rising, and it was mainly for the brothers. I mean, Black Brothers Esteem is for a lot of the brothers who were HIV positive, and I wasn't HIV positive, but I would go to the meetings, and at times I would feel like, am I encroaching upon their space or whatever? But really, I was welcome. But the one reason why I want to tell the story, because there was an individual who came to the meeting one day, and his phenotype, as you put it, I look over and I see a white man, and everybody's wondering what's going on. And usually, for the most part, I think that people of color are really forgiving. Come
We've
on.
had to be.
Come on, you can come to the cookout even though you're mediocre. So he then shared and actually told his story, and it turns out that he was a Black man, and that we needed to check our biases and because I think that we were really protective of the space, number one. But you got to be careful, like when protecting the space. We weren't willing to kind of ask the questions, and finally we did. It was clear that he definitely qualified.
I had a really interesting conversation with this guy I hooked up with in an undergrad. So the setting is important because the conversation became very inflamed. So we had finished hooking up, and
that's important.
That part is important because it's important because what follows is really kind of, it was eye-opening for me. So I don't know how we got on the conversation, but I remember asking him, because he looked Puerto Rican, because whatever. So I remember asking him, where's your family? What are you? Right. And he was being very kind of coy, and I could tell he was being really deliberate about it. So he looked like he may have been Black and white or mixed or something. And he was refusing to identify with being Black. And I said, okay, that's really interesting. And why is that? And he goes, well, at what point, if I'm Black and white, at what point am I white? And at what point am I Black? And I go, well, generally people kind of turn to their community and they look at their community, and this is what he goes, well, I was raised with entirely white people, so why can't I say I'm white? And so it became this conversation about at what point is someone not something or is someone something? Is it only when, for example, we look the type or we sound the type?
What really sucks, I think that that it's off on a different tangent or whatever, but just like you look to your community, it's almost like the community will label you if you're not careful. The community will put you in a box.
Mm-hmm,
Like as much as he might want to just identify a certain way, if the folks that he spends his time with don't see him that way, yeah, then
well, I want to tell you why I don't think it's a tangent, because I think in these designated spaces,
I don't mean this. I don't mean like in a bad way.
oh,
I don't mean. Look, what I was saying is I wanted to be careful because it's like, but actually, Anthony's really good about bringing us back to the topic. I was like wanting to go in that direction. Yeah, go ahead.
well, what I want to say is that these issues come up in those spaces.
Yes.
You know, like I don't know that, I don't belong to this community, so I won't say too much about it. But, there have been changes in one of the meetings that I go to, and a person has decided to identify in a different way than they have generally. You can interpret that in whatever way you want to. And that is rubbed up against other people who identify with this particular community. And that is very interesting to me, that like there is maybe this unspoken rule that like when we designate these spaces, there is kind of like a rubric, or there's a standard by which we're kind of making judgments about who can stay and who can leave.
Yeah. Well, I think some of that can get down to the point of whether it's like, comes down to color when it comes to like how dark you are or how light you are, or it comes down to maybe transness or being queer, how queer you are, and maybe how like cishet like passing you are, or like, sometimes they'll say that with bisexual people, who maybe happen to be dating somebody of the opposite sex, like that, you know what I mean? Like all those sorts of, I think, nuances. But I think but because of that, it does create a different experience. I know that I've felt a lot more vulnerable now that I look like a trans person than before, when I was maybe more like, even when I was just like a queer dude, like with a beard and stuff, like I still felt like, I don't know, there was enough of me to where I could read cis, I guess. But once I got to the point where I started looking trans, I felt more vulnerable. And so I do think there are different experiences depending upon maybe where you're at in the spectrum of whether it's race or gender expression or whatever. There are differences, but there are also collective, uh, there's places for connection as well.
Yeah. It makes me think about, I like that you're using the word connection, because it makes me think about like, what is the ultimate purpose of these spaces, right? And on one end, it's about safety, and on the other end, it's about connection, and it's about building connection and a feeling of safety, or in a space of safety.
Well,
right?
I think, yeah, but I think but it's also about like, I'm coming into the room to recover. Like I'm coming in to recover, and if I can cut out all that potential racism or transphobia or whatever, and just be in a space and fucking deal with my recovery,
Yeah.
then
Exactly.
it's a little less to deal with all at once, rather than sitting in a recovery room and dealing with microaggressions for this and that and the other, when you can just show up and just be like, okay, whew, I don't have to worry about this part of what's happening outside of this room, and really just focus a little bit more, and I guess there's some privilege in that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just thinking about that because last week I shared at or I think it was a couple of weeks ago, I shared at a People of Color meeting. And I think that this is another reason why I thought of this idea of designated spaces, because I realized that it was a 10 or 15 minute share, but my share was tailored in a way, and I was able to kind of, because I think when they ask you to come up with the topic, and I think my topic was, how are you using the steps to deal with this idea of, how are you using the steps and working steps to deal with this idea of otherness. And we had a conversation about otherness because it kind of pops up. But I found that my share was a little more militant.
Oh,
A little more,
like Beyonce Super Bowl militant,
no, like,
or
well,
like Black Panthers. Or like,
basically, I'll be serving meals during the day and brandishing a firearm. No, no, I was a little, I was able to kind of talk about how angry I was and how frustrated, like, because I used to go through this time, I used to go through this period, and this is, I was working here at the club, and I was really toxic, and I decided I needed to focus in on areas of myself that I wasn't paying attention to, my Black Lewis, my gay Lewis, all those
Yeah.
things, all those intersections that kind of come together. And so I found this amazing Black sponsor to work with because I wanted to be able to talk to this individual and, not have to explain the little things. Because if
Mhm.
you can sit across from somebody and see that they're just not following,
Yeah.
and I don't want to, and that would annoy me.
Well, then you have to translate and
Exactly,
Mhm.
translate, or if you try to explain a situation, and really what it comes down, you explain the situation. I'm not trying, it's not for us to judge. I'm just trying to explain
Mm.
what went down, but the person may not have had that life experience or whatever, so can't understand. And that's why it's so great. There's so many people that can sponsor it.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think if you are going the route that we're going with sponsorship, finding individuals that can kind of relate to you on almost
Mhm.
a cellular level,
Yeah.
where you don't, it's almost in a really good hookup where you don't have to talk. The communication is
Mm.
just kind of natural, where you
Right.
almost read each other's thoughts.
I'm trying to think if that's
Well,
like the kind of hookup I like.
well, and I think some of what's happening, why, because I feel like there's kind of a resurgence of the last couple of years of having these more separate spaces, especially in recovery. And I think part of that is because I think for so long, white people were in a position to tell non-white people that racial issues are not something to bring in the room. But then
Absolutely.
once there's all this happening where people are exposed to like the realities of what Black people deal with in living in the United States, and trans people and whatever, that a lot of white folks were processing that stuff or talking about it at meeting level, which from a white person you might think like, oh, like this is like I'm going through this and I'm like, wow, I didn't know this or whatever. But it's such a dehumanizing and hurtful experience for the people who are not white in the room,
Right.
and so that makes the recovery space not safe for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I keep having to remind myself that we're talking about recovery spaces.
Yeah.
And I think the reason why I have to keep reminding myself of that is because it's a much larger issue that like infiltrates a bunch of other spaces, that it's
Oh,
not just
absolutely.
recovery, and
Mhm.
I mean, and this is something like I've dealt with in like in my professional life, where like you're doing a lot of kind of code switching, which is a lot of like the translation stuff. And there's just such a weight to this type of discussion because and at the same time as we're talking, I'm like, man, like I need to be really careful about like what I'm saying because I don't want to be misinterpreted, right?
Yeah.
Because that's the other thing that
That's
happens.
a tough one, but thank God we're not texting this.
Yeah, no, we're not texting.
No, because I mean,
yeah. There's just a lot, and
Yeah.
and my heart goes out to like a big part of my life, kind of like growing up, was doing this kind of caretaking of white folks, right?
Yeah.
Because I just wanted to feel credible and seen, and so the only way I could do that was like buying into whiteness, assimilating in whatever way that made me convincing,
Exactly.
right?
Yeah.
And then going into recovery and like slowly shutting that apart, taking that apart.
Mhm.
And what does it mean for me not to code switch as much, and what does it mean for me to be relaxed, which I've only been able to do in Black and brown spaces.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I was going to say this because you just mentioned about like being worried about like maybe kind of being misconstrued, but I really feel like this is the place that we do that.
Yeah.
That we say it, we talk about it, and that if we do need to be corrected or nudged, then let's be corrected and nudged. But not having the conversation, I think, is more detrimental.
Yeah.
Like I think, yeah, because if I'm so worried about like how someone might receive it, that I'm missing an opportunity to have a conversation that needs to be had. Maybe that person who doesn't receive it the right way is not ready to hear it.
Right.
Mm.
Yeah.
And we kind of set the container for that as well, for us to like be in a space in which we can say the wrong things in order to learn, because that's also like, I think it's also important that there are designated spaces, but designated spaces to kind of be more mixed in experience so that we can work with one another. And I love the idea of recovery, especially the spiritual aspect and the principles of recovery, to begin kind of like working through some of like these like transphobia, racial, like all this bias and stuff. Like for me, it's like, what better place to do it than in the rooms in some ways? Like what better container for me to work through some of that stuff, you know, and like have tools to kind of like cope with it. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah, you're it's we have to be willing to fail courageously, right?
Yeah.
Because
Ooh, Brene Brown, huh?
did she say that?
She said.
I'm
Well, those
sure
are
she
just-
said it. Yeah.
Jesus Christ, it's been said before.
I know.
But we have to be able to fail courage. I just we have to be able to fail courageously. And if I pick that apart, it's like we have to be able to fail and not be afraid of failing.
Exactly.
And I think that the way we do that for each other is that we make it okay.
Yeah.
And the way that we make it okay is like we don't shame people for saying something that may have offended us. We make it okay. And I think part of that is like, gosh, I mean, I have definitely been kind of called to the carpet in situations where I'm like, I don't agree. And at the same time, I think it's really important for people to feel comfortable
exactly.
vocalizing those things.
But right. Well, and I mean, I think it's probably a useful tool not to shame other people. But I think the thing that's important, if you're on the other end of that, is really like, because sometimes those ways of responding to being hurt or harmed or feeling attacked aren't always maybe like the best way, if you will. But I just don't get to say that other person is coming at me or trying to, I don't know, in a way that's not right, you know? Like I have to really like think back and be like, oh, well, why do I feel shamed because of this? Or maybe why are they responding this way, instead of having a judgment, like, or a,
If I'm open to growing, if I'm open to growth, then I'm gonna be okay. Like, and it's taken some time, but it's like when I speak out of turn or when I say something that is not right and someone corrects me, especially when it's in a loving way, or I pay attention to the intent or how they're coming at me. Usually, it's like it's not about, you know. I don't see it as shaming. You know, it's like, hey, this is. In some ways, it's more loving. I was going to share one of the individuals, because it was a hybrid meeting that I spoke at, and one of the individuals shared passionately, and she happened to be a trans woman. And she said, and because I had said in my share, and I always say this, everything that touches the light is a part of my recovery. Like, you know how we talk about there are no outside issues? There are no outside issues. And she said so beautifully, she said, if it's something that affects me and my recovery, I get to work the steps around it.
yeah.
I get to work the steps around it. And what that does is that makes it so that when someone in the meeting, who those bleeding deacons or whatever, seems to think that they can tell you what you should talk about, no. This is what affects me, and so I get to work the steps around them, and I think that it's definitely probably more available to us in these meetings that are that are specifically for us. You know.
Speaking of things that have been said before, everything the light touches, that's from The Lion King.
Absolutely,
isn't it?
Nothing I have here is creative.
Isn't it from The Lion King? Rafiki goes, or maybe
no, it's like I totally
everything the
stole
light
it. I'm
the
on
sun
everything
touches.
the light touches.
You got it from The Lion King.
Exactly.
Oh.
I tell that to my sponsor. See this, everything that the light touches is a part of my and they're all stupid because they think like, wow, you're so smart.
Yeah, you remind me of Disney. I don't know why.
Right.
There's this Bonnie Ballot, were you gonna say something?
No, go ahead.
Okay. There's this, what I was looking up for folks who can see me is there's this beautiful speech that Sonia Sotomayor made at Berkeley Law. This was years ago before she became, this is when she was an appellate court judge. And she gives this really beautiful speech because one of the things that was held against her was that she said that she would hope that a Latina, she used the word Latina to refer to herself and her judgment and her judging. And one of the things that she said, I'll see if I can find the quote, but if I remember it correctly, she says that as Americans, we are caught between wanting to laud our diversity, but wanting to also pretend like it's not there. Right. So we want to say like, oh, look at all of our diversity. But then when we actually talk about what it means to be a diverse group of people, we start to kind of take a few steps back. Let's just, I guess, let that simmer. Yeah.
let that simmer.
Let that simmer.
We're not hearing a lot from our audience today.
No.
Like they're quiet. They're here because I can see they're in the room.
And I know, and some of them have sent me text messages.
Like in shock. What the hell are you guys talking about?
One person sent me a GIF of Beyonce at the Super Bowl. That was Brian. Brian sent that.
Well, mainly because this one here was. I know that you were trying to come for me, but it's okay.
When? Why? When?
When you were talking about when I was
Beyonce
talking about being militant.
No, I wasn't trying to come for you.
Okay, well that's fine. It's like,
oh, as Bonnie Violet said last week, is that a feeling or is that a fact? Which, by the way, I don't agree with. But well, to quote,
it's not a fact.
Someone I know.
There wasn't a fact. It might have been a feeling.
Right. Because Anthony and I like ganged up on you in that moment.
Did we win?
I'm totally.
Oh. They did not. Are we going? Well, let's not go too far. So for folks listening in, we'd love to hear about your experiences with designated spaces. Yeah.
Thoughts and feelings around that.
Thoughts and feelings. In the meantime, I think, where are we? Okay. In the meantime, I think I'm wondering if y'all have had maybe positive experiences where I have like a very specific thing in mind where you have someone who's from outside of the group who actually gets it, and what has that looked like?
That happens a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That actually happens a lot. There, like, it would be kind of just dishonest if I said there are some people, white people, specifically white people, who are more, and I hate the term, but for lack of a better term, who are more woke because of woke, because they've done the work and they get it.
Right.
They get it. Like, I'll share.
I'm listening.
I'll share a story. Okay, so we got this. I don't know if I mentioned you guys, but we got this flag in at my job, and it's an ally flag.
Oh, what does it look like?
Oh God, it's ugly.
Okay.
Okay, so it's got the black stripes and black and white stripes for like the straight. Back when straight people were thinking they didn't have enough designated spaces, and then it has like the trans and bear and all those others in. And the first thing I thought, as a result of all the talking that I've been doing and participating in groups, I was like, wait a minute. This to me, like if you are a person who is an ally and you feel like you need a flag to show that you're an ally, you're probably not an ally.
Interesting.
I was thinking to myself, because what you're doing with this flag is you're centering yourself in other people's situation. I think allies are folks who pay attention, who keep their eyes open but keep their mouth shut. Sometimes, and maybe speak up when the time is right.
Yeah.
But they don't call the meetings unless it's a meeting of other allies. They don't call the meetings. They simply show up and they participate. And if you want to support trans rights, then you fly a trans flag. If you want to support gay or bi, lesbian, whatever, you fly that flag. But having a separate flag, and so because I think that it's almost like after 9/11 when everybody's flying those the 4th of July flags that. One
4th of July flag.
The American flag.
Oh,
sorry. Give me a second, okay? No, it was almost like they used the term pornographic patriotism.
Oh yeah, of course.
Yeah, and so it's like everybody's got a flag now and they want to fly it because I want to show you that I'm this and I'm that or whatever. But you know what? It really comes down to just you have to show me in who you are.
Mm-hmm.
Right. I can't be concerned. Like you can wear the shirt all you want. You can wear the shirt and talk the talk, but it's just like people are like, I can't be racist. I date nothing but black guys.
Yeah.
But you're probably racist.
Right. Yeah. There's a comment from Dai Shaddai, I think. An ally can bring light to a situation, hiding on the minds of anyone who sees their flags. In my honest opinion, heart emoji.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying here. I was thinking about, because I don't necessarily agree with everything that you said, but I was just thinking about how an ally flag might make sense in like a space where there aren't other allies. But then you said you should hang up our flag,
Yeah.
and I
Mhm.
thought, oh shit, okay, you got me on that side. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Bonnie, by the
I
way,
like
go ahead.
Yeah, no, I like that, but also like I was recently I wonder in flying a flag or like so one of the things that I noticed being in Boise and being in Idaho, being trans and like I don't know, there's just like it's almost like backwards a little bit, or it feels like it's smaller communities and those sorts of things. And I was recently talking with someone who they work in a hospital, and they saw someone else who had like a trans flag on, and they themselves are trans, and so they were like, oh, this is another trans person. But it was a way they could kind of signal to one another without saying that. Um, I wonder though if it's a non-trans person who's wearing that, if you know what I mean, like if there's that confusion. That was the only thing that came to mind for me because I was like, why would you want another flag? But then I think maybe people don't want to take on, I don't know. I don't know if some people just feel like they don't want you to, I don't know if it's that they don't want to think that you're gay or trans, but more of like, this isn't mine to own.
Right.
Do you know what
Right.
I mean?
Yeah. You know, the other thing, I just for my own kind of peace of mind, and also I want to read this thing, and also we only have like 3 minutes, is that one is like we're not going to solve the world's problems in one episode
No.
or in any episode, and
But if we could,
and it's all fraught, you know, and it's all fraught. So with y'all permission, I just want to read what she said. Is that okay with both of you?
Yeah.
So she says, America has a deeply confused image of itself that is in perpetual tension. We are a nation that takes pride in our ethnic diversity, recognizing its importance in shaping our society and in adding richness to its existence. Yet, we simultaneously insist that we can and must function and live in a race and colorblind way that ignore these very differences that in other contexts we laud. So good. My like summation of that was not very good.
No, it's good.
So we're at that time.
There's that time.
We're at that time.
So I start with your new reading. Yeah. So the new, the Castro Country Club, we want you to know, is a safe. No, actually, what do we do? We tell you how you can get in touch.
Yeah. So you know how it goes. You can go.
So you can get in touch with me at Instagram Lulu86. I've been posting new pictures lately, so it's cool.
New pictures.
Okay. NEW.
Yes, and you can find me at A Queer Chaplain on all of the things, or on my website at aqueerchaplain.org.
And you can kind of find me at @LucasCCC on Instagram. Are we going to say things? Or you can email us at podcast@castrocountryclub.org.
Yes.
You could
go ahead.
You could also send us a voicemail message by clicking the link in the description and going to our speak pipe.
Okay, and then the Castro Country Club is a safe and sober community center for all people and a refuge for the LGBTQ recovery community. They provide programs and services that help people change their lives by supporting personal growth. And their vision is to reduce the suffering of addiction by connecting people to community opportunity and support. You can find more information at castrocountryclub.org.
I just found a counter argument to your argument.
Okay.
So you know how we have like cultural appropriation?
Yeah.
Right? So I can see how, for example, say like a straight person putting up a gay flag, or let's make it something else. Like, I don't know, some person who's from, I can't think of a really good example, but this idea that like, why are you repping this thing that you are not? Right? Like I can see people also taking issue with that, right? It's so
Yeah, right? I know. I feel like we could almost have a whole nother, like a part
If you
2 next week.
On this flag, you would understand why I am so kind of.
Because you thought it was ugly.
It's an ugly
I'm
flag.
looking it up
It's an
right
ugly
now.
flag. There are so many flags. There's so many ways to show that you're supportive or that you're
Yeah.
not.
Yeah, no, and
Yeah.
I'm not necessarily like, I'm not saying that what you said was right or wrong. I was just curious.
And I'm not willing to. Oh yeah, see that's
Oh wow, that's pretty bad.
yeah, exactly. And actually, it's even uglier because the one that we have, it like I don't get it. I just don't get it,
Right.
guys.
Well,
If you have a chance, go look at this flag. But more power too. I think that we all have to kind of stumble around and figure out what works for us.
mhm.
And obviously, I'm like super passionate about this, but really, whatever. I'm gonna love you regardless.
Yeah, and since we're closing out, just like each other, just love each other, just be nice. Even if you don't like each other, just be nice.
And be sure to tune in every Tuesday at 4 p.m. Pacific Standard Time when we go live here at Castro Country Club on both Facebook and YouTube.
Yes.
I guess that's it.
And find us everywhere you've listened to your favorite podcast.
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 All right, we love you.
Thank you.
See you next week. Ta ta.